And welcome to another Living Hope Today study, my brothers and sisters. How happy I am you're here. Have I told you lately how much I appreciate you? I really do. Thanks for liking, clicking, sharing, all the things you're doing to spread the word of God. I appreciate it. Now, we're in Genesis 41 today, and we're going to cover 40 verses. So I'm going to have to read fast. But in the end, just think about this. Trouble doesn't last forever. All right? And we're going to see that in Joseph's life today. You recall his brothers sold him into slavery. He ended up in Potiphar's house. Potiphar's wife falsely accused him of attacking her. He ended up in prison. The cupbearer and the baker came to prison as well. The cupbearer was delivered from prison, and Joseph said, "Could you please remember me?" But the cupbearer forgot about him, and Joseph has been rotting in prison ever since. Not exactly living the best life now, as some preachers might say we're entitled to. But look at this, and this is just amazing. When 2 full years had passed, 730 nights in the cell, eating out of the bowl, dressed horribly, suffering. Right? And God just leaves him there. God just leaves him there. But God has a reason. Watch this. 2 full years have passed. What happens? Pharaoh has a dream. Dreams again. God's moving his plan forward through dreams. He was standing by the Nile when out of the river there came up 7 cows, sleek and fat, and they grazed among the reeds. After them 7 other cows, ugly and gaunt, came up out of the Nile and stood beside those on the river bank, and the cows that were ugly and gaunt ate up the 7 sleek, fat cows. Then Pharaoh woke up. I just want you to think about the detail and repetition we see in chapter 41. It's like these details get said over and over. You'll see what I mean as we go forward. He fell asleep again. This is Pharaoh having a dream. You remember Pharaoh's at the top of the food chain when it comes to Egypt, right? He's lord over the whole place. He fell asleep again. He had a second dream. So just to repeat it, here it comes again. God's showing him something. 7 heads of grain, healthy and good, were growing on a single stalk. After them 7 other heads of grain sprouted, thin and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 healthy full heads. Then Pharaoh woke up. It had been a dream. In the morning, his mind was troubled, so he sent for all the magicians and wise men of Egypt. Pharaoh told them his dream, but what? All the guys are showing up. Again, Egypt had a lot of spiritual life, even though it was false. They believed in it. They could do things, but could they interpret Pharaoh's dream? Nobody knew what this dream was about. What's God doing? He's setting the stage to deliver not only Joseph from prison, but to deliver the message clearly that he is God, and he is using his servant Joseph to communicate to the whole nation that he is the true God. All right. Then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, "Then? Why then? Well, I remember there's a guy in prison that told me my dream. Today I am reminded of my shortcomings," he says. "Pharaoh was once angry with his servants, and he imprisoned me, and the chief baker in the house of the captain of the guard." As we saw earlier in the other chapter, that happened to the cupbearer and the baker. Each of us had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. Now, a young Hebrew was there with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us, giving each man the interpretation of his dream. And things turned out exactly as he interpreted them to us. I was restored to my position, and the other man, that's the baker, was hanged. So Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was quickly brought from the dungeon. Just here's a little hint of the suffering. When he had shaved and changed his clothes, he came before Pharaoh, and he's living a life of a prisoner. He's been doing it for years. Can you imagine? God, where are you? God, I don't understand. Is this really what my life is going to become? How do I know I'm not going to be in this prison for the rest of my natural life? God, will you please help me? I asked the cupbearer to help me, and I gave him the correct interpretation of his dream, but he's forgotten about me. 2 years later, now God moves. It's time. Joseph's been basically persevering through his trial with no end in sight. And God now is going to move. I guess this is such a story for us to think about when it comes to, are we persevering through something we think will never end? Can we have the same faith that Joseph has to say, God, it doesn't matter where you put me or how long I have to be here. I belong to you. I want to serve you. This is faith with a capital F, and Joseph's got it, and God's going to honor him for it. As the story moves forward, Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream, and no one can interpret it, but I've heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. Nobody I know can do it, but let's see if you can do it. All right, look at this. Joseph, to the Pharaoh's face, after years in prison, says, what? I can't do it. Wow. But why does he say he can't do it? Joseph replied to Pharaoh, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires. God can do it. I can't do it. God can do it. I'm not operating in my strength, my power, my wisdom. No, I'm operating as a servant of God. Even after all this tragedy and suffering and the things he's been through, he still is acknowledging God as the source of his strength. God will do it. God will do it, Pharaoh. All right. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, in my dream I was standing on the bank of the Nile. So now watch. Here we're going to see the text repeat the whole story. I was standing on the bank of the Nile when out of the river came up 7 cows, fat and sleek, and they grazed among the reeds. After them, 7 other cows came up, scrawny and very ugly and lean, and I had never seen such ugly cows in all the land of Egypt. The lean, ugly cows ate up the 7 fat cows that came up first. But even after that, even after they ate them, no one could tell that they had done so. They looked just as ugly as before. And then I woke up. In my dreams, I also saw 7 heads of grain, full and good, growing on a single stalk. After them, 7 other heads sprouted, withered and thin and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 good heads. I told this to the magicians, but none could explain it to me. And then Joseph says to Pharaoh, the dreams of Pharaoh are one and the same. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. Notice again, Joseph gives all glory, all credit and honor to God for what he's about to tell him. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good heads of grain are 7 years. It is one and the same dream. The 7 lean, ugly cows that came up afterward are 7 years, and so are the 7 worthless heads of grain scorched by the east wind. They are 7 years of famine. That's why they're thin and ugly. It is just as I said to Pharaoh, God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. Your dream, Pharaoh, came from God. Let me explain it to you. 7 years of great abundance are coming throughout the land of Egypt. All right, you're going to have abundance. But 7 years of famine will follow them. Then all the abundance in Egypt will be forgotten, and the famine will ravage the land. All right, God has a plan. 7 years of abundance, 7 years of famine. That's what's going to happen in this 14-year span. And what does he say? He says, look, Pharaoh, the abundance in the land will not be remembered, because the famine that follows it will be so severe. You're not going to remember anything about the good times because the bad times are going to be really bad. All right, the reason the dream was given to Pharaoh in two forms is that the matter has been firmly decided by God, and God will do it soon. Here's a reason behind the two dreams. Okay, God is going to work this out as he has stated in your dream. And now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man. I can imagine that as Joseph says that, if those words come out of his mouth, something inside of him wants to raise his hand and say, here I am, here I am. But he doesn't. He doesn't point attention to himself. Now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man and put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Okay. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take a fifth of the harvest of Egypt. Okay, 20% during the 7 years of abundance. We're going to save that 20% for 7 years. They should collect all the food of these good years that are coming and store up the grain under the authority of Pharaoh to be kept in the cities for food. So we're going to create a food bank. It's going to take 20% of all the crops that come in, and we are going to store it for at least 7 years, all right, in every city. You need to find a way to get that done, Pharaoh. This is Joseph talking to the grand leader of Egypt. This food should be held in reserve for the country to be used during the 7 years of famine that will come upon Egypt, so that the country may not be ruined by the famine. Here you go. The plan seemed good to Pharaoh and to all his officials. It makes sense to us, right? So they said, so Pharaoh asked him, can we find anyone like this man? And I want you to just see this line, because this is how God works. What's the line? One in whom is the Spirit of God. We see by the actions God has performed through you, Joseph, that you belong to God, that the Spirit of God speaks through you. There's nothing now about, hey, but you still have to serve your sentence for attacking Potiphar's wife. No, that's all gone. Who knows if she's even still alive? She's exit stage right. She's out of the story. But he has survived the false accusation. He's survived being enslaved. And now Pharaoh looks at him and says, hey, if you think we should appoint somebody that has wisdom and discernment to get all this done, you're the guy. We're going to appoint you. We're going to raise you up. So imagine what Joseph must be feeling and shaking his head. I was at the very bottom of the social ladder, all right? I'm in prison indefinitely, wondering if I'm ever going to be released. Right? Why not forget about that young Jewish foreigner guy that attacked Potiphar's wife? Let's just forget about him. Let him rot in there the rest of his life. God allows this in Joseph's life to build him up, to increase his faith. It doesn't seem like a very fun way to learn, but Joseph has been stripped of everything. He knows all he has is God. When he stands before Pharaoh, what does he want to talk about? God. Let's don't talk about me or my ability. Let's talk about God. Pharaoh says, look, I see that. I see God is with you. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. Pharaoh, I believe under the inspiration of God's Spirit, understands that this dream is real. It's going to happen just as Joseph has said. And not only that, but Joseph is the guy to lead them through this problem. Wow. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you. Joseph is absolutely 100%, even more than 100%, completely restored. He is brought from the very bottom to one step below the very top. He's in charge of all of Egypt. How does God work? Who knows the mind of God? That God would take this little Jewish boy that got falsely accused and sent to prison, that God would be the one to work out a plan where this young man, Joseph, is eventually going to be the one God uses to deliver God's people from this famine. But we'll see that as we continue. Today, I just want you to focus on this. Suffering, even when we don't understand it. If we belong to Jesus Christ, if we know the Lord, suffering has its time and place as God determines. And our job is to persevere and wait for him to move. Joseph doesn't make a jailbreak. Joseph doesn't tell the Pharaoh how he's been falsely accused and he should be exonerated. Joseph just wakes up, does what he's called to do that day, and God does the rest. It's a very valuable lesson for us who love the Lord and who know how to suffer. I just pray you take it to heart, church. God bless you. Serve him well today.
Lord, we give you glory.